Some houses have histories, some have secrets, and some have something waiting inside. The Johnson family was just looking for a fresh start, a new home, a quiet life, a place where their two children, Oliver and Emily, could grow up safe and happy. The house seemed perfect. A charming two-story home sitting at the edge of a wooded neighborhood. The kind of place that felt untouched by time. But some places are never truly empty. The first few nights in the house were peaceful. Rachel and David settled in quickly. Emily spent hours decorating her room. Even Oliver, just 5 years old, loved running through the hallways, exploring every new corner. But then, the nightmare started. The first sign. It began with Oliver. He started waking up at the same time every night. 3:14 a.m., crying, shaking, pointing toward the dark hallway outside his bedroom. At first, Rachel thought it was just night terrors, the kind of thing kids experience when adjusting to a new home. But then Oliver started saying things no 5-year-old should say. The burnt man is watching. Rachel froze, her stomach twisted. The what? She asked gently. Oliver's tiny fingers curled around his blanket. His little voice was barely above a whisper. The man in the hallway. He's all black, and he's watching. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. She glanced toward the darkened hallway. Nothing was there. No movement. No sounds. Just the stillness of a sleeping house. She forced a smile, gently stroked Oliver's hair. "It's just a dream, sweetheart," she whispered. She tucked him in, turned on his nightlight, stayed by his side until his breathing slowed, until his tiny fingers relaxed, until sleep took him again. But as she walked back to her own room, a strange feeling crept over her, like she was being watched. The first night Rachel saw him. For the next few nights, Oliver kept waking up. Same time, same fear, same words. The burnt man is watching. Rachel and David tried everything, nightlights, lullabies, even keeping his door open. But nothing helped. And then, one night, Rachel saw something she wasn't supposed to see. She had woken up thirsty. The house was silent, everyone asleep. She walked down the hallway toward the kitchen, her bare feet pressing against the cold wooden floor. As she passed Oliver's room, she glanced inside. He was asleep, breathing softly, his little hands curled beneath his cheek. Rachel let out a small sigh of relief. But then, she saw something move, a shadow in the hallway, at the far end of the hallway, just beyond the staircase. A shadow, tall, still, standing in the darkness. Rachel's breath hitched, her heart pounded in her ears. For a moment, she thought it was David, or maybe a trick of the dim light. But something about the shape was wrong, too still, too silent. And then, it shifted. Not a person, not a shadow, but something else. Rachel took a step forward, her voice caught in her throat. And in that moment, the air changed. A faint smell of smoke curled around her. Faint, but undeniable, like something had just burned. She blinked, and the figure was gone. Vanished. Leaving behind nothing but silence and the lingering acrid scent of charred wood. The security camera footage. Rachel didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening, waiting. When the sun finally rose, she grabbed her phone and checked the security cameras. The hallway camera had motion detection. If something moved, it would have recorded it. She scrolled through the footage. Nothing. Nothing. Then, 3:14 a.m., the motion sensor had activated. She clicked play. The hallway was empty. No figure, no movement. But then, something flickered. A split-second glitch. The frame jumped, and for less than a second, she saw it. A shape, a figure, standing at the end of the hallway. And then, the screen went black. What was it? Rachel felt her stomach churn. Her hands shook. The motion sensor had detected something. But why couldn't she see it clearly? Why had the camera glitched? And most importantly, why was Oliver the first one to notice it? She had to know more. This wasn't just a shadow. This wasn't just a nightmare. Something was in their house. Something burnt. Something watching. And she had a terrible feeling. It wasn't leaving. Not yet. Not until they knew the truth. Some shadows fade. Some step closer. And once you see them clearly, they see you too. Rachel couldn't ignore it anymore. She had seen something. Oliver had been talking about it for weeks. And now, there was footage. Something was moving in their house. Something was watching them. And worst of all, it was getting closer. A familiar smell and a distant shape. The next morning, Rachel kept telling herself she had imagined it, that the glitch in the footage was nothing, that Oliver's nightmares were just a child's fears. But deep down, she knew the truth. Something was here. She could still smell it. That faint, burnt scent that wasn't there before. It clung to the walls, to the furniture, to her clothes. And that night, she smelled it again, stronger, closer. And when she stepped into the hallway, he was there. The burnt man appears. It wasn't just a shadow this time, not a flicker in the corner of her eye, not a trick of the dark. It was him, standing at the foot of the stairs, tall, unmoving, burnt skin charred black, melted. His face twisted, not in pain, but in something else, something worse. Recognition. He was looking right at her. Rachel's lungs locked. She wanted to scream, wanted to run, but her body wouldn't move. Then, he raised his hand and pointed. Not at her, not at the door, but at Oliver's room. And then, he vanished. The scratch marks on the door. Rachel didn't sleep that night, didn't close her eyes. She sat on the edge of Oliver's bed, watching the hallway, listening, waiting. The house was silent, but the air felt wrong, like something was waiting just beyond the walls. And then, she saw them, on Oliver's bedroom door, tiny blackened scratches. Deep grooves burned into the wood, like fingertips pressed too hard, like something had been trying to get in. The next morning, the camera catches something new. Rachel told David everything. He wanted to believe her. But when she showed him the footage, he couldn't argue. The motion sensor had picked something up. And that wasn't even the worst part. Because when she slowed the footage down, when she watched it frame by frame, she saw it. Not just a shadow, not just a glitch, but a hand, burnt. Fingers stretched, reaching toward the camera. And just before the screen glitched again, a face, melted, eyes hollow, mouth moving, as if trying to say something. Rachel's realization. He's trying to communicate. Rachel's hands shook. This wasn't just a presence. It wasn't just haunting them. It was trying to tell them something, trying to warn them. But about what? And why Oliver? Why was he the first one to see it? What did this burnt man want with their son? The next night, the knock at the door, they set up more cameras. Rachel refused to leave Oliver's side. David stayed up, watching the monitors. The entire house felt wrong, like something was waiting. And then, just after midnight, the front door knocked 3 times. Slow, deliberate. Rachel and David froze. No one was supposed to be here. Not this late, not in this neighborhood. David checked the peephole. His breath hitched. No one was there. Just darkness. Just silence. Then, the door unlocked, by itself. And from the hallway, Oliver giggled. He's coming inside now, he whispered. Some places hold memories. Some hold something worse. And when the past refuses to stay buried, it comes back in flames. Rachel stood at the front door, her pulse hammering in her ears. The lock had turned by itself. Oliver had whispered, "He's coming inside now." And yet, when David yanked the door open, there was no one there. Just the night, just the wind. And yet, the smell of smoke curled through the air. Thick, heavy, wrong, like something was burning, like something had never stopped burning. Digging into the house's history, Rachel couldn't ignore it anymore. The burnt figure, the scratches on Oliver's door, the fact that their 5-year-old son knew things he shouldn't know. Something was here. Something was trying to tell them something. She needed to know what happened in this house, and why it wasn't over. The forgotten fire. Rachel spent the entire next day searching through town records, old newspapers, archived police reports. And then, she found it. The fire. It had happened 30 years ago, in the house next door. A man had been trapped inside. They said he never made it out, that the fire had consumed everything. But something was wrong. The official story didn't match. According to fire department records, they had searched the rubble. They had sifted through every inch of the burnt wreckage. And yet, there was no body, no remains, no proof that the man had died in the fire. It was as if he had never been there at all, as if the fire had taken him, but left his shadow behind. The connection to their house. Rachel's hands shook. She read the next part of the article, something she had missed before. After the fire, when investigators couldn't find the body, they expanded the search. And what they found was disturbing. The fire hadn't started next door. It had started in this house. The basement that was never opened. Rachel's stomach twisted. She and David had barely spent any time in the basement since moving in. It was unfinished, cold. A place they used for storage, nothing else. But now she had a terrible feeling. A feeling that if the burnt man was trying to show them something, it was down there, waiting. The basement door, and the sound beneath it. That night Rachel stood at the basement door. Her hands trembled on the knob. The wood felt colder than it should. Colder than the rest of the house. David stood behind her, quiet, still. Even Oliver had stopped talking, like he knew what was coming, like he had always known. She swallowed, turned the knob. The door creaked open. The basement was pitch black. Still, empty. And yet, a sound rose from the bottom of the stairs, a slow, dragging shuffle, a sound like bare feet on concrete. And then, a whisper, software low, coming from the darkness. It didn't burn. Rachel's breath caught. The voice was hoarse, brittle, like it had been trapped in smoke for years. She backed away. David grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the stairs. And then they heard it. A loud, metallic clang, like something falling onto concrete, like a door slamming shut. Something was down there, and it had been waiting for them. What was in the basement? Rachel's mind raced. She had seen enough horror movies to know what this meant. Whatever was down there, it had been sealed away, hidden, forgotten, and now it wanted to be found. David's discovery. The door beneath the floor. David grabbed a flashlight, took a deep breath, and stepped onto the basement floor. Rachel watched from the stairs. Every part of her screamed to pull him back, to leave, to run. But David kept moving, searching. And then he saw it, a trapdoor, covered in soot. A burn mark in the shape of a handprint, scorched into the wood, like someone had tried to claw their way out, like someone had burned alive beneath it. David froze. Rachel felt her stomach drop. And then, from beneath the door, a single knock. Some stories end with fire, some start with it, and the ones that refuse to burn become something else. Rachel stood at the basement door. She didn't want to open it, didn't want to know what was waiting below. But the burnt man, the shadow that had been haunting them, had been pointing here the whole time. And now, standing on the cold wooden steps, staring down into the basement's pitch-black silence, she knew. He wanted them to see. The basement that shouldn't exist. David stepped forward first, flashlight in hand. Oliver clutched Rachel's fingers, his tiny hands ice cold. He wasn't scared, not like he should have been. Instead, he whispered, "He's waiting." Rachel shuddered. David moved down the steps. His footsteps echoed too loudly in the empty space, and when he reached the floor, he stopped. "Rachel, there's something here." Rachel's stomach tightened. David knelt down, brushed dust away from the ground, and froze. Rachel stepped closer, heart pounding. The light from David's flashlight glowed against the floorboards. Not wood, not stone. Metal. A door, the hidden trapdoor, and the handprint left behind. Rachel knelt beside David, running her fingers over the rusted metal. It looked like a hatch. Old, sealed shut for decades. Her breath caught as she saw it. A blackened mark, a handprint, burned into the surface like someone had been pounding against it, trying to escape. It didn't burn. The whisper came from the floor. David stumbled backward. Rachel's pulse thundered in her ears. And then, a knock from beneath the trapdoor. Software slow, deliberate, like someone was still inside, waiting. Opening the hatch. And the first thing they saw, David reached for the latch. Rachel grabbed his wrist. "Don't," she whispered. But he already had. The metal creaked. The smell of ash and rot spilled into the room. The hatch swung open. David shone the flashlight down. And what they saw made Rachel gag. A room, a tiny cramped space beneath the basement floor. The walls blackened with fire, chains hanging from the ceiling, and in the center, a body, or what was left of it. The burnt man wasn't in the fire. He was left here to die. Rachel clamped a hand over her mouth. David stumbled backward. This wasn't just a hidden space. This was a prison. Someone had been locked inside, left here, burned alive. And the worst part? The bones were still intact, not ashes, not dust. Charred, but untouched. Like the fire had tried to consume him, and failed. Like something had kept him here, trapped, waiting. Oliver's warning, and the last movement in the pit. Rachel's mind reeled. Who was he? Who had done this to him? And more importantly, why hadn't he left? Then, from the top of the stairs, Oliver's tiny voice broke the silence. "He's waking up now." Rachel and David snapped toward him. And then, from the darkness beneath the trapdoor, something moved. Not just the bones, not just the chains. The air itself seemed to shift. The temperature plunged, and deep in the pit, beneath layers of blackened skin and twisted limbs, two hollow eyes opened. And they were looking at Rachel. The final escape, and the basement. That sealed itself, Rachel screamed. David slammed the hatch shut. Something pounded from below, harder, faster. Desperate. The whole basement seemed to shake. Rachel grabbed Oliver, sprinting up the stairs. David followed. And just as they reached the door, the basement light exploded. Glass rained down. Darkness swallowed the room, and behind them, the trapdoor rattled violently, as if something was trying to come through. David slammed the basement door shut, locked it. Then they ran. Out of the house, into the car, and they never came back. The house was never meant to be opened again. A week later, Rachel got a call. A contractor had come to seal the basement shut, to cement over the hatch, to make sure no one ever opened it again. But when they went down there, the trap door was gone, not just locked, not just sealed, gone, as if it had never existed. The chains, the bones, the burnt remains of whoever had been trapped there, all gone. The last warning and the final call, Rachel and David moved far away, started over, tried to forget. But one night, a blocked number called Rachel's phone. She let it go to voicemail, and when she listened, the message was just static, until the very end. And then, a voice, ragged, burnt. It's still burning down here. Some things can't be buried, some won't stay forgotten, and some are still waiting. Rachel and David never went back. They sold the house, left town, tried to forget. But forgetting was impossible, because every night Rachel could still smell it. That faint, burnt scent in the air, like ashes that never stopped falling, like a fire that never fully died. The first sign, Oliver still sees him. For months, everything was quiet. Rachel told herself it was over, that they had escaped, that whatever had been beneath the house was gone. But Oliver knew better. Because one night at 3:14 a.m., he woke up, walked to his parents' room, and whispered, "He found us again." Rachel's stomach twisted. She shot up, flicking on the light. "Who?" she asked, her voice shaking. Oliver pointed at the closet. Rachel's breath caught. The door was open, not wide, just enough to see a thin sliver of darkness, enough to see a shadow move inside. She yanked Oliver close, heart hammering. David woke up with a start. "What's wrong?" Rachel didn't answer. She grabbed Oliver, turned to the closet. Slowly she reached for the door and pulled it open. Nothing. Just hanging clothes, just empty shelves. But the moment she exhaled in relief, she saw them, blackened fingerprints on the inside of the door, burnt, scorched, as if something had been pressing against it from the other side. The second sign, the static on the baby monitor. The next night, they set up cameras again. Rachel wasn't going to let this happen again, not here, not after what they had already been through. The monitors showed nothing unusual. Until 3:14 a.m., the baby monitor in Oliver's room crackled to life. Rachel and David sat up in bed. Their blood ran cold. It wasn't Oliver making noise. It was something else. A faint, distant voice. Muffled. Hoarse. Like someone speaking through smoke. The voice rasped. "It's still burning." Rachel bolted for Oliver's room, threw open the door. Her son was asleep, breathing steady. But the window was open, and the room reeked of smoke, like something had been standing right there, watching him. The third sign, the night. They almost didn't wake up. Rachel and David were done. They packed their bags, told Oliver they were going on vacation, anything to get away. But that night, before they could leave, they almost didn't wake up. Rachel's eyes shot open at 2:47 a.m. The room felt wrong, heavy, thick. She tried to breathe, but the air was hot, burning. She jolted upright. David gasped awake beside her. Their lungs ached, their throats burned. And then Rachel saw it. The room was filled with smoke. Thick, black smoke curling from beneath the bedroom door. David sprang up, coughing. The fire alarm wasn't going off. Rachel ran to Oliver's room, scooped him up, raced to the front door, and froze. The handle was scalding hot, like flames were licking at the other side. David ran for the kitchen, grabbing a fire extinguisher. Rachel clutched Oliver, trying to think. They had to get out. But then, the smoke shifted, and from inside the swirling haze, in the corner of the room, a shape began to appear. A man, blackened, charred, standing just beyond the flickering light of the street lamps outside. Rachel gasped. David grabbed her arm. They yanked the door open, and the smoke vanished. Just like that. One second, the house was filled with it. The next, it was gone, like it had never been there. No fire, no burning walls, nothing. But the door handle was still scorched black, and on the floor, a single burnt footprint, leading inside. The final clue, and the last message. Rachel and David left that night. They never came back. They never spoke of it. And slowly, life moved on. Until 2 months later, when Rachel got another blocked call. She almost didn't answer, almost let it go to voicemail. But her hands moved on their own. She lifted the phone to her ear and heard it, the sound of crackling flames, deep, slow, breathing in and out. And then, a voice. "You took me with you." The burnt man never left.